I'm gonna love you.
Hey, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge, everybody. Today I want to give you a game that was played between Anatoly Karpov and Viktor Korchnoi in 1974. Now, they were playing in a FIDE candidates match, and it was the finals between those two, and the winner would go on to become FIDE world champion, but at the time, neither of them knew it. It was because during this time, Bobby Fischer decided to give up chess, or else, if FIDE did not meet his demands for the title match, he didn't like the current system that they had in place. He wanted to change it to like a 10-game match, and he just wanted to change the rules around because he didn't feel like the rules were favorable. So he decided to forfeit if they didn't meet his demands, and they didn't. So this game here, this match here, wound up determining who was going to be the next world champion. And Anatoly Karpov played a brilliant and spectacular game that many have modeled one of the best games in the Sicilian defense against the Dragon. It's really a model game that if you want to study the Sicilian Dragon, how to play it for white, then pull up this game here, and there's tons of things to learn from. So let's go ahead and get into the game and see what exactly unfolded. So you have e4, c5. This is the start of the Sicilian defense. Okay, and then here with knight takes d, this signifies that it's an open Sicilian because you have the semi-open d file and c file. Knight f6, knight c3, and then this move here, g6, starts the beginning of the dragon defense, the ever popular Sicilian dragon. If you look at the pawn structure there from d6 to h7, if you use your imagination, you can kind of see the shape of a dragon. That's one of the things that some people like to say why this is called the dragon variation. There's another theory out there about it, but I kind of like this one here because if you do kind of look at d6 like the head of a dragon, and then the rest of the pawn structure is kind of like the body, and h7 is the tail, you can kind of use it if you get your imagination going. But black has two pawns here that can play in the center with d6 and e7, and that's one of the advantages, whereas white only has the e pawn. But on white's side, white is going to have more space, so that's the pluses and minuses. Bishop e3, bishop g7 is the textbook move. There is a trap right here. If black plays knight g4, then white can play bishop b5 check, followed up with bishop d7, and then this actually loses the knight on g4, because even though it looks scary, looks like white is moving into a square where the bishop can capture it, if you notice, the bishop is actually pinned due to this bishop right here. So black just loses a piece in that variation there. And if black decides to block with the knight c6, then knight takes knight, pawn takes, bishop takes, check, blocks, bishop captures the rook. And so at the end of that, white has just won a rook and a pawn for a knight. So that's way better for white as well. So that is a known trap, a fairly well-known trap, if black plays knight g4 there. So Korchnoi played bishop g7, f3, knight c6, queen d2, castle, and then bishop c4. This is the start of the Yugoslav attack. Some people call it the solstice variation. Andy Solstice is a American chess player and author. He has a lot of great books on calculation, and he's a very, very well known, knowledgeable chess author and player. So this, like I said, this move here initiates the Yugoslav attack. Bishop d7 is clearing the way so the rook can come to c8, h4, rook c8, bishop b3 gets out of the way for in case the knight would take on d4. He would also be hitting the bishop if the bishop was still on c4. That's another trick. So the Sicilian defense has a lot of tricks and traps in it, which is why it's very, very hard to play initially until you can learn all of this stuff. But that's why you're watching the videos, and that's why I'm going over this stuff, so we can speed up your learning time as well. Queenside castle, knight c4. The idea behind knight c4 is to make white give up the light square bishop because it's attacking the queen and the dark square bishop. And if you notice here, one of the thematic moves in its position here is to use the battery. So white can use the battery to go to h6 and try to knock off black's dark square bishop, because black's dark square bishop is very, very powerful. It's probably worth more than the standard 3 points in a position like this here, where it can rain down on white's queen side over here. So the idea here is to make white give up one of his bishops. He has to take here. So bishop takes, rook takes. And here, white plays h5, which is a pawn sack, to open up the h file. Because if you look at the position on the board, you can see that black's plan is pretty clear. Black is going to play on the semi-open c file. He's going to have his bishop raining down over there. His dark square bishop is going to be raining down on the queen side over here. And then he's going to play on the c file with the rooks. He's even going to sack his rook for the knight eventually once the queen moves away to open it up over here. And then the black queen is also going to join in on the party over here. So black plan is pretty clear. So white says, hey, I got to do something too. So white says, I'm going to just give up the h pawn so I can open up the king side over here, and I can get my initiative going as well. If white would have played bishop h6, this would have been a mistake. This is another trap, because then black could have played rook d4, queen takes, and then bishop takes, check, king b1, queen a5. So at the end of that, black would have won material. He would have won the knight and bishop, and the queen is coming to the 5th rank to stop white from playing h5 and putting a halt to any of white's plans. So that's why white couldn't play bishop h6 right away. So instead, he played h5. Knight takes, because Korchnoi would never feared any type of sacrifices. That's one thing that he was known for. He would accept most of the sacrifices that he was offered, and then he would defend. And usually he would emerge at the end, the victor. G4, kicks the knight, knight f6. Knight d(e)(2 is a good move because it shores up the c3 knight. and it stops any ideas of those sacks that I was talking about with rook take, the exchange sacks with rook take knight. For example, let's see here. Black played queen a5 here. But if he would have just played a6, right, instead, Black could play. This was also one of the ideas behind knight e2. This is a tricky trap here. White could have played e5, d takes e, and then g5, which kicks the knight, and now white wins the bishop on d7. So that was a tricky, another underlying and indirect threat from playing knight d2. Black goes queen a5. Now white can finally play his bishop h6. Bishop takes, queen takes. Rook comes to rook fc8 because black needs to get his attack going, and black is going to sacrifice sack exchange on c3. That is his plan. He knows it. Karpov knows it. We know it. That's the plan going on here. So Karpov plays rook d3, which was brilliant because that puts an end to all these exchange sacks on c3. If he would have played like rook h2, this is what could have happened. Rook takes knight. Knight takes. Rook takes knight again. Bishop takes. Queen takes. And then black is very much in the game here. So, but he played rook d3 instead. And then black played rook to c5. Now, the reason behind that is because if you look at the position here, white wants to play g5, kick the knight out the way on f6, and then black wants to capture on h7 and checkmate. So the idea that Korchnoi was going for was that, okay, if I put my rook and my queen on the 5th rank, that's going to stop Karpov from playing g5. So the next move here, g5, was staggering to see on the board because Karpov played it anyway. Now there's a couple alternatives here. In the game, Korchnoi went ahead and took rook takes pawn, but he could have moved his knight here to h5, but that wins for white because then knight goes to f4, rook takes pawn, the other knight goes to d5, which is threatening e7. So rook takes knight, rook takes, queen takes a, rook takes knight, sack, queen check. And then at the end of the variation here, you can see that black is getting checkmated because his king is too exposed and black's attack has fizzled out. Checkmate on g7. So that's why Korchnoi played rook takes pawn. Now, rook d5 is a great move because the knight can't take the rook because the knight is the defender of the h7 square. So that's a really good move there. Rook has to take. Knight takes. Again, threatening e7. Check. Now the other knight goes to f4 to reinforce the knight on d4. d5. Bishop c6. stops, bishop c6 stops white from playing knight takes knight and then moving his other knight to d5. So the bishop goes to c6. And now the next move here, e5, is a brilliant move because what it does is it stops the queen from interfering on that 5th rank there, from swinging over to the king side to help out. And then if black captures that pawn, it's going to be trouble. Knight takes knight, check, pawn takes. And then this great move here, knight h5 threatening checkmate on g7. Pawn takes, rook g1, check. Again, leading to checkmate. So let's go back. So he can't take. So it plays bishop takes knight. Pawn takes knight, again threatening checkmate on g7. Pawn takes. Now black is threatening checkmate on e1 with the queen and the rook. So these have to be very forcing moves here. Queen takes h7, check. King f8. Queen h8, check. And believe it or not, black resigned here because he's just going to go down material. Now, when black plays king e7 because he's in check, you have knight takes, bishop, check. And then if the queen takes here, he's just going to lose. He's just going to lose his rook to rook e1, check. King d7, queen takes rook. And that's just going to be too much down a whole rook to Anatoly Karpov. So if he doesn't, though, if he doesn't play queen takes, he can play king d8. And then you have queen takes f, check. And then from here, you have rook d1 to stop the mate that was on e1 with the rook and the queen. And at this point here, it was just too much as well because white's up a full piece. So you even have things like queen c3 check coming that would force the queens off the board. Or you could just play knight c3 as well and just be up a knight. So in both situations, white is going to be up a piece, and that's too much. So this game here was the perfect example of how to attack the fianchetto king, and the winner, like I said in the beginning, Anatoly Karpov went on to be crowned the FIDE world champion because Bobby Fischer forfeited the match. He didn't play. And just a side note, that this was such a devastating loss to Korchnoi is that he actually gave up playing the Sicilian Dragon after that. He didn't play it anymore. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.